I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Well, as the year ends, the lawmakers are busily preparing for a new year starting in Jefferson City. And joining me today, Ron Richard, Missouri Senate President Pro Tem, and our local senator. Thank you for being here today.
It's nice to be here again in our 30-year process of interviews.
Well, I appreciate you visiting with us, and I know that you have had a very busy fall getting ready for the next session. But before we start talking about what's upcoming, if you look back at 2017, how would you characterize that for the Missouri legislature and the Senate?
Well, you always have to take a while to get used to the new governor and his personnel and how he governs. And that was, we spent most of the year doing that. However, the legislation we did on right to work and some labor reform, tort reform, I think was significant. Yeah, but he is signing legislation that we have been trying to do for a number of years. So I think we didn't pass a large volume of legislation, but it was significant, and I think it's going to bode well for Missouri for the next number of years. So I had a couple of members we had to get in different committees because we had some turnover and stuff. So that happens. It's going to happen this year too. I'd say it was a pretty good year, but just getting used to a new governor, new administration, new treasurer, new secretary of state, attorney general, and having to work through some things left from the other administration. So it was all right. I mean, we keep plodding ahead. I mean, sometimes we're supposed to go slow. We don't really want to go too fast. You make too many mistakes.
Did you feel that maybe a lot of people had bigger expectations, thinking, okay, we're a Republican governor and a Republican legislature?
Oh yeah. There's always that. People say, well, we got all branches of government. We're just going to go in the complete state of rebellion and do everything we want to do. And sometimes those ideas are good, sometimes they're not, and sometimes they need to be worked through. I mean, good legislation usually takes a couple of years to work through, I don't get in too big of a hurry. I want to make the things right, because the last thing we need to do is have legislation end up in the court and they interpret things differently, and they're bad about that, judiciary. And I'm always sensitive about the three branches of government. I mean, the governor, from time to time, along with all governors, try to push in on legislative authority for us to govern, to do the budget. Same thing about judiciary. They think they can make laws and they just don't interpret them. So I'm very sensitive. I'm one of very few that, maybe I'm just getting old at this thing. But I do protect the legislative space of what we do when I was Speaker of the House and I was President of the Senate. So I had a couple issues with the governor and other people in the judiciary, so I'll probably have those issues again. I'm always pushing back on trying to influence what we do.
So separation of powers between the different branches
of
government
is
supposed to be the way it's written.
It is important, and I'm very respectful of what we have to do.
Well, looking forward to the new year, I know you have a lot happening, and there's a lot even happening in Washington that people are wondering, how is that going to affect the state of Missouri? As we're recording this program, Congress is passing a big tax bill. Is that going to affect the state?
Yeah. We're going to know here soon if we have to do any legislation to incorporate the tax legislation come out of D.C., but we've got 2 or 3 senators that have a massive tax bill of their own, and I got to make sure that we don't end up like Kansas, which is you can cut taxes and get to a point, but you still have to pay for services, and what services the customer, our constituents, want to pay for is important. And we still have an issue with higher education. We're out here at Missouri Southern, and all governors the last 6 or 8, 10 years have been cutting higher education to a point that I don't think it's going to be able to survive at the current level, which I would like to see it. So I've got to deal with that. Tax legislation is going to be important. It always is. I mean, people want to cut to the bone, and I want to take a little more methodical approach to revenues and make sure that we are competitive. And I don't mind getting one level of competitive with other states in the South. That's kind of where we compete with, where that's where all the good training is, where a lot of the companies are going to headquarters stuff. We got to compete. So I'm watchful about that. I still do some economic development. That's what I know quite a bit of. And my eyes are always on the horizon of what it takes to make or to help Missouri be competitive on attracting labor, retraining people and making sure that we have good quality jobs for the future. So those are 4 or 5 issues that's probably going to be important. It always is important, but this year it'll be important even more because I have 1 year to get it done.
Right. Well, you mentioned, this past term, tort reform and labor, job training and so forth. The effects seeing the results of those, they don't happen overnight either.
Well, I think you can see that in the local economy about some of that we are on the top list of attracting companies and expansion. And that's happened all over the state of Missouri. And according to the Chamber, Rob O'Brien, it's happening here. We're getting looks that we've never gotten before. I think if we can hold this Joplin, this area, Neosho, Carthage, with I-44 and I-49, that's going to be important. I think we've got some good news coming down the road on our airport. I think we're working on some additional flights to Dallas, to Chicago. That's going to happen over time. It's just going to have to because of the demand we have. I think with our hospitality industry, we're building hotels, 2 major hospitals. I mean, it's just, we got a medical school, the university. I mean, there's not too many places that have a medical school, a university, and have a confluence of commerce that comes in. I mean, our economy is regional, and in the daytime, as many as 260,000 people are in town to work and to play and to go to healthcare. And then the other day, I was at a opening of the ribbon cutting it's getting ready for the new Veterans Clinic here in town. I mean, what other region is going to have a Veterans Clinic that people don't have to travel a long region, a medical school, training doctors? We think at least 20 or 30% of them will stay in this region. The hospitals, the business, I mean, it's just a great time to be in this area.
So when you go to Jefferson City representing the district, do you have others say, how are you doing that in Southwest Missouri? Or, do they look at this part of the state as
Everybody, a lot of people scratch their head at the Joplin Springfield area and say, how do you create jobs? How's the growth happening? What do you do? And the fact is that some of the legislation we've done, I mean, we're at the odds of St. Louis and Kansas City, but the votes are in rural Missouri. So we've had a group of legislators in the House and the Senate that understand that the partnership you have in Southwest Missouri, our partnership has grown. So when we have a vote block that we put together when I was Speaker, there's Central Missouri, everything south of Kansas City, almost to St. Louis, all southern, north, northeast, northwest. We have the votes to make sure that rural Missouri and suburban Missouri gets taken care of, not at the expense of Kansas City and St. Louis, which was done for 50 years. Of course, they are a hub. They drive the economy. I mean, what's good in St. Louis, Kansas City is good for us, too. We're hooked I-44 and 49. But we want to make sure that agriculture is protected, that police safety is protected, and, we still have to work on some highway infrastructure. We're been unable to find a plan that everybody can agree on how we're going to expand that. I mean, we got needs. 44 and I-70 need to be 6 lanes at some point in time. We got other highways and infrastructure just needs a lot of work. So we're going to have to figure out how to fund that. Those highways and infrastructure and rail is an asset. It's on your balance sheet. And if you don't take care of them, sooner or later, it is end up even have a massive more cost to repair that infrastructure. So I just want to get to a point where we can take care of it where the traffic is needed and make sure it's safe and reasonable.
Right. Well, that kind of comes down to how do you pay for, as you said, all the different services, and transportation is one of those key areas that people,
we have to decide what people want to pay for and what we can afford. At the same time, if we cut taxes, I'm sure there's going to be some of it cut. We want to make sure we model with the Fed, and we have to, this decoupling, we have to see if the deductibility of the federal tax on ours, what the cost is going to be. So a lot of things to talk about in January and February.
Now, people are already pre-filing bills. You mentioned those people
started December 1st,
so
yes.
You're already getting an idea, as Senate President Pro Tem, what are some of these issues people are saying, I want us to talk about?
I've read about a third of them, and some of this legislation is really good. Some of it is reasonable, some of it needs talked about, and some of it is really nutty.
There's some things that you're wondering why they propose it.
What in the heck are these people thinking? So But when I send them to committee, I send them in order how they're filed. I mean, I can't pick and choose.
Right.
So these chairmen have a lot of power in the Missouri Senate, and they can decide what's to be heard and what's to be voted on. Then I'll decide what to pull it out of committee. And there's always a surprise, a March surprise, I call it. Always something happened that we ought to take care of in March, whether it's a economic bill. If you can remember years ago, we had the Ford Motor Company in Kansas City going to expand, and we had to do that. It ended up going to special session. So I want to make sure that the surprises are minimal, and we take a methodical approach to debate, because we're time sensitive. I mean, once we start, we got to get done in the middle of May, and we still have a budget that we need to work through. So, it's the legislation, interesting, a lot of it if you looked at it, I'm sure you have, on tax and on health care. I mean, what are we going to do with this health care? It's absolutely horrible trying to get health insurance, and that's more driven by the Fed. Are we going to get more ability to do our own health care as far as Medicaid and design our own package? I mean, there's talk about that in Washington, so I don't know. I mean, a lot of questions, but we want to stay flexible. In case something happens in legislation, we're able to function and get something. Function is a strong word. We're able to take advantage of opportunities if the Fed allows us to do something.
So you're proceeding with what we need to do in Missouri, but you're always keeping an ear out for what's happening in Washington that might influence Missouri.
Yeah, and also states in 15, 20 states in this region. I want to make sure. We've lost out opportunities for years about car manufacturing plants in the South that if we'd have been a right-to-work state, we'd have had those car plants. And frankly, what's going on now, the unions are actually doing better in right-to-work states than they are in non-right-to-work states in Missouri. Prevailing wage is going to be an issue, because we have the school districts want to add on, but they have to pay such an exorbitant amount for labor costs that these schools and public facilities can't afford to do that. So that's going to be a big issue we're going to talk about. I expect we'll try to pass something this time on that.
So as you're preparing for the session, talking to the legislative leaders, are you hearing anything from the governor's office? I mean, is there communication going on between the different branches of government as far as expectations?
Yeah, I met with the governor last week, and we talked about some of his priorities, some of my priorities, and he talks with chairmen a lot too, because once I send things to those particular committees, I mean, the chairman need to work with the governor's office. What would you sign? What do you like? And then also you got to see what the House likes. Right. What the chairman of the House, what your opposite counterpart is, and see if we're going to have legislation start over there, start in the Senate, what it's going to look like. So there's the governor and his staff talk to my chairman a lot, and I get in the middle of it when I have to, but ordinarily I know what to do. I've been there longer than most of them, been there longer than the governor, been there longer than some of the senators and reps, so I know what to do and how to do it, and I get help when I need it, but I'm pretty independent.
Well, you've had a lot of experience, as you say, of course, with the legislature, and I know that when people ask you questions, you often give them a straight answer.
Sometimes I get in trouble about that. You haven't seen me on the front page of Globe yet or on the news, but if I have a handicap, it's usually saying what's on my mind, but I just can't help it.
And let people know.
People ought to deserve to know what a leader in the Senate and the House thinks. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. At least we can get to a point where if I'm wrong, maybe someone can help me out and get me right.
To figure it out, right? Well, I know in Washington we hear a lot about partisan politics, and people are saying, they can't get together because there's two different parties. It's the state of Missouri. Obviously, you still have Republican-controlled legislature, but of course the Democratic Party is also represented there as well. What is your feeling about the partisanship or in the politics in the state? Has that changed?
Well, people put my party in power for a reason, for us to do certain things. And when I was elected in 2002, we hadn't been in power for over 50 years. And there's a number of things that we thought we ought to do and the people putting us also ought to do. And the other party believes that we're on a wrong course. About a third of the things we do may be partisan. The other 2/3 really isn't. If you're going to work on dyslexia, you're going to work on education issues, we're going to work on transportation. A lot of that is just people come together, just maybe just moderate differences. But the partisanship, I mean, it is more rancorous, but the 24-hour media, I mean, you can YouTube, I mean, nothing's ever a conversation. It's always out there, and sometimes you need to have a private conversation in order to negotiate. Right. It's not necessarily public. You can, at that particular time, you never know what the outcome is going to be, and get to a point where negotiations sometimes need to be in private. There's nothing wrong with partisanship. I mean, the people think it's bad now, but if they go back to Lincoln debates and history, I mean, it was really severe. I mean, it was really nasty. Right. It's just being reported more. So that doesn't bother me, the partisanship. It tends to create more dialogue about what the future of the state of Missouri or the country is going to be. So
gets people talking.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't like it, turn off the tube.
Well, you mentioned the media, social media aspect. Has that changed in your years of working in the legislature? You know, the fact that people in the palm of their hand have their phone, that instant information.
Completely changed elections. So now when I go out and recruit and run elections for senators, which I'll have to do before I leave next November, that is a media that you have to make sure you understand the people you're getting to, certain age groups. That's where they get their news. Right. They don't really watch television to watch you and I doing this. And it's relatively cheap, but you know, someone put an accusation against you on social media. I mean, in order to protect yourself, you have to watch what's going on, because it's hard to push back on accusation. You know what's going on now on men and women doing inappropriate behavior in legislators and in business and in the Fed. I mean, if it's true or if it's not true, but once it's out there, it's difficult to defend or difficult to push back. And I suspect, I don't know if it's true or not true. Some of these, you know, that election we just had in the South, I mean, apparently this guy was a real dandy. Of course, I think it was best for Republicans losing that U.S. Senate race, because what I read, it may have been, most of it may have been true, but you know, we had issues in the House and the Senate.
Issues flying through social media.
Yeah, I mean, we had to send a senator away from Kansas City for inappropriate behavior with interns, and we had a Speaker of the House that was doing some nonsense. Thank goodness, I'm one of the few speakers that's not going to be indicted. You know, so the rest of them have all had to go away.
So you left that position with a clean record.
Yeah, I've yet to, you know, I'm going to do the right thing.
Well, you mentioned that, you know, you have a lot to accomplish, and this is, with term limits, this is your last session coming in. Do you have any personal goals that you would like to say, I want to get done between now and when we adjourn in May?
You know, you can't say that when you're in leadership, because members will use that against you and say, well, I'm not going to vote for this or do this and let it out committee. So I'm pretty careful. So if I have legislation, I usually get it into committees through the chairman. Right. But I'm directing traffic and then a rule on points of order. I want to just make sure that I handle the Senate in a bipartisan way. We're talking about partisanship. I try to be fair on how I treat members, and if they behave badly, then I have repercussions that I can do and push back. But in leadership, when I was either in the House or the Senate, I want to make sure good legislation gets prominence. Good legislation,
so
majority.
Put it toward the top of the stack, right?
And I've gone through now and having members decide what their 2 or 3 top priorities are. We're going to get them to the committees first.
Well, in addition to serving as a leader in the Senate, you also, of course, have your local district. Tell me a little bit about the local representation, what you're maybe hearing from voters, constituents in this area.
Well, as we stated, a lot of them are concerned about transportation. Most of them are concerned about health care, what they do about their wives and their kids. And we really don't have a ability to do much until we get some direction from the Fed. The complete uncertainty about Congress unable to pass legislation, although they're going to do the tax bill. And then that leads to uncertainty on taxes. What's that going to mean? What is that going to cost us? I mean, there has been a thought that if the tax bill may affect Missouri's budget up to $1 billion, I think it's probably going to be closer to $100 million now that it looks like. Anyway, we're going to be reviewing that next couple of weeks. But sometimes locals are concerned about travel, this real idea of getting on an airplane, getting on an Air Force Base, and I mean Gwen handles everything from passports to White House passes to getting. We had a person that had a family member in Florida that was able to get some benefits, but they couldn't get to the right person. So I called a friend of mine who was a state senator in Florida. Staff worked it out, and now this young kid's able to get what he deserves. So, you know, I've worked all over the country, all over. I had dinner the other night with some Chinese individuals, and of course I understand the Chinese, and I've traveled there, the Taiwanese, and understand some of the issues they're wanting, but I want to make sure, you know, do I want to say America first after what the big guy's wearing the hat, the president? I don't know if I want to say that or not, but I'm pretty sensitive about American business and American taxpayers.
Trade and relations and so forth.
I don't know if I want to say America first, but.
Well, when you're looking at your role, we're talking about the upcoming session, but you have been busy year-round, even though they supposedly left Jefferson City, the work was done with the session. Tell us a little bit about what happens when you're not in session. When
I'm not in session, I'm fundraising all the time for members up for election around the state, and then at the same time I can understand what issues that they have to face in order to get elected. And sometimes it's different one than down here in Joplin, Southwest. Sometimes it's the same. But I think I'm on my 5th car running around the state since I've been Speaker, and I've raised a significant amount of money. And I've given it all away to other members in the House and the Senate to make sure we keep a majority. Because when I was Speaker of the House in 2008, I mean, we almost lost the House with an Obama landslide. I mean, it was a battle down to the last day, and we ended up winning by about 9 or 10 seats in the House. I mean, it was a battle. And that is a 20-hour a day. I mean, when I'm on the road all the time. So, and I'm lucky my wife, Patty.
She lets you do all that traveling.
She understands that. So, but, and then I travel in other states, and I go with other forums, the Speaker's House, the President Understanding, and we'll sit around the table and discuss common topics. So the topics are all the same, whether it's health care, transportation, and how they find conclusions, how they fix problems, and sometimes it fits, sometimes not. Sometimes our ideas are stolen. I mean, I don't mind taking an idea that works well and modify it. So we've done that on some economic development job training, particularly modeling after the South, Georgia and Alabama. So
sharing with the other states, kind of working together along those lines.
Yeah.
And so as you're looking ahead, you said raising funds for people running for office. People are already declaring that they want certain seats, and of course your seat is one of those for next year. So
they're already in my office measuring for curtains, and I just remodeled the office. So, what are you measuring curtains for? That's just the nature of it, you know. Term limits are, that's how I got there when, you know.
So the seat opens up, somebody else looks for it.
Yeah, new ideas, new people, let them do. Maybe they're going to have a better take of what's going on. It's probably time for me to go. And looking at your picture, you know, when I was first elected, I wasn't gray-headed, Judy.
So this is
what's happened to me, what Jeff City has done to me, and travel around, look at me. I'm all gray-haired, and my wife says, you're not gray-haired, you're white-headed. So that's a different degree.
But he's referring to the report that you sent out so keeping in touch with the voters locally, this is a summary of what happened this past year.
That is a brief summary, yes. But, you know, if they have particular questions, they can always call and ask.
Of course, you have the website. You have a website where people can follow what's happening on a regular basis.
State website, and we have press releases. So we try to pass on information the best we can.
So when the legislature's in session, big challenge is communicating with people what you're doing. You know.
Yeah, and having an office in Joplin, I mean, it just makes it easier for people to come by sometimes and not have to make a call. So, and that's not cheap. No. But I'm pretty good at fundraising, so I'll make it work.
Make it work and tie it together.
I make it work, yes. It's worth it to having people be able to come by and talk to us.
Well, if someone were to walk up to you on the street and say, what do you enjoy the most? You've been in the House, you're now in the Senate. What do you enjoy the most representing people as an elected official?
What do I enjoy the most? I think the fact that I'm one of very few that's ever been elected to a leadership in Southwest Missouri. I mean, following Dick Webster and Carthage being Speaker, and then being the only one to ever be President, Senate Speaker. Then using that, parlaying that into ability to help legislation end up that benefits Southwest Missouri as well as the state. Sometimes in leadership you can force a direction on something that's really important. It's just nice that people have decided that they want to elect me. I haven't had much opposition since I've been mayor of Joplin. I mean, I don't think, maybe one time. And that's unique too. So, I feel a bond with people that have sent me to the mayor's office, or to the speaker's office, to the pro tem's office, and I try to make sure I do it with respect, with tradition. I'm very respectful of authority, and I'm respectful of what the institution stands for, and so I try to make sure I honor that, and I don't want to disappoint, and I don't want to be disrespectful, and I want to make sure people are proud that they have someone there that understands some of their needs, many of their needs, and I try to fix them the best I can.
Well, Senator, I'd like to thank you very much for visiting with me. Look forward to hearing what's happening in the upcoming session.
Sure, Judy, call anytime. Maybe you can come to Jeff City. We'll do a live one.
We'll do a live one from there. Follow up what's happening. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. And I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next time at the same time on the station.